Okay, welcome back. This is a great chapter of the Parable of the Phantom City. We're on page 76. We're going to continue again on point 5 concerning the 16 sons of the king. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, in the number 16, or 10 and 6 in Japanese, the 10 represents the 10 worlds and the 6 represents the 6 sense organs. The king is the mind king. Okay, the reward body, and the sons are the functions of the mind. Okay, these are the sons of the great universal wisdom excellence. If we're great universal wisdom excellence, if our mind and body represents great universal wisdom excellence, then these are the sons are the functions of the mind. All right. So these are the sons of great universal wisdom excellence, the functions of our mind, the single principle that constitutes the true aspect of all phenomena, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, our mind. Now when Nichiren and his followers chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, they are acting as the 16 sons of the king. Okay, there's no separation between you and Shakyamuni or Amida or anybody else as it relates to you chanting Daimoku and functioning in the world as a bodhisattva of the earth. The sutra states that these 16 sons all became Buddhas in one or another of the various lands in the 8 directions. This means that one will come to realize, that our earthly desires, with the 8 sufferings that they entail, are none other than enlightenment. This means that we will come to realize. So this process is the process of attaining Buddhahood in your present form. You come to realize that earthly desires and our sufferings that they entail are none other than the reason that we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, which has manifested without us realizing it into a reality that we now understand. A depth of life, a depth of understanding that could not have come without that journey, that we would not have the wisdom to take. That's the whole point. You know, a lot of people think, you know, there are so many things that we don't think to chant about. We don't think to chant about really Kosen Rufu. We say something about it in Gongyo, but that's not really where our heart is. Being bodhisattvas of the earth and fulfilling our vow to the Gohonzon. This is a very important aspect of how our mind perceives our responsibility in the Dharma realm. Okay, so point 6, on the words, wipe out the phantom city in the passage, at that time the leader, knowing that the people have become rested and are no longer fearful or weary, just like they would be if, like it says, this means that we will come to realize, okay, same thing here, wipes out the phantom city and says to the group, you must go now, the place where the treasure is close by. Okay? Because once we realize that our minds are none other than enlightenment, that we're very close to attaining Buddhahood in our present form. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says at the top of page 77, these entities or bodies of ours are wiped out. The ones that are transient, the ones that do not reflect our eternal nature. And in this sense, it is a phantom city. That is, if we take this wiping out as a true wiping out or extinction, then our bodies are a phantom city. But if we have the wisdom to see that this wiping out is not a true wiping out or extinction, and again, he's comparing this to nirvana, okay, but only an aspect of eternal life, then it is a place of treasure, a treasure land where we find truth. All right? That is what the lifespan chapter means when it says, but in truth, I do not pass into extinction. To wipe out the concept of wiping out itself is the true wiping out. Now that sounds like wordplay, but it's not. To get rid of your delusion and to eliminate it is the true wiping out, not the elimination of a lifetime, okay? Because that elimination of delusion karmically will carry on into your next life, okay? To wipe out the concept of wiping out itself, wiping out, eliminating nirvana, okay, blown out, To wipe out the concept of nirvana is itself the true wiping out. Getting rid of this thing where you're thinking that you're going to finally get to a heaven spot and you don't have to make any more, go through any more processes. This is not the way life or the universe works. Okay? So, this is the doctrine embodied in the assertion that the three vehicles expounded in the provisional teachings are in fact the one vehicle of the true teaching. And what were those three vehicles expounded in the provisional teachings? That was voice hearer, cause awaken one, and bodhisattvas. Okay? Now he's saying, in actuality, there's only Buddha. Okay, so that's what that means. This is the doctrine embodied in the assertion that the three vehicles expounded in the provisional teachings, the three little carts, are replaced by the great white oxen cart, okay? The vehicles expounded in the provisional are in fact the one vehicle of the true teaching. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Again, we may say that the words wiping out the phantom city refer to the wiping out of the temples of the slanders of the law. And he says this means the conversion of such temples to the correct teaching. It does not mean their destruction. Now, when Nichiren and his followers chant Nam-myoho Renge, by the way the Soka Gakkai grew as much as it did, as quickly as it did in the 50s and 60s, came from actually going to different temples, doing shakabuku on the entire temple, and then the whole temple converting to become a Nichiren Shoshu temple. Okay, that's how they went from being the smallest school to the largest school under the support of the Soka Gakkai and the three original presidents. Again, we may say that the words wipe out the phantom city refer to the wiping out of the temples of the slanders of the law, not literally. Now when Nichiren and his followers chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, they are revealing that the phantom city is none other than the treasure land. Because when we're chanting, we're revealing our Buddha nature that is not supposed to exist until we get to the place where we attain Buddhahood. It's not referred to as our original state, but his teaching is that it is our original state. It's Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. They are revealing that the phantom city is none other than the treasure land. These mountain valleys and broad plains where we live are all, every one of them, treasure lands of eternally tranquil light. So it doesn't matter where you're born. This is all a potentiality of human existence. So it's not about the specific environment you're born into. That's a reflection of your karma. But your karma is also that you're born with the 10th world and all the other 9 worlds of your phenomenal existence. So you can bring that forth by chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo if you somehow get an opportunity to have the truth and wisdom of the original teaching be passed on to you. Point 7 on page 77. On the passage, now you must press forward diligently so that together you may all reach the place where the treasure is. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says the word all refers to the 10 worlds. So that means everybody from hell up through Bodhisattva. The word together refers to the words of the Buddha in chapter 2, expedient means, hoping to make all persons equal to me without any distinction between us, turning all of those 9 world entities into a 10th world entity, a Buddha, right? Making them equal to me without any distinction between us would mean that they become identical to the Buddha that is preaching this teaching, right? The word reach means to arrive at the level of the highest effect, the state of Buddhahood. The highest level. You can't go beyond Buddhahood. So there's nothing more to go for after you've attained Buddhahood. It stays with you and you remanifest it lifetime after lifetime, teaching people that it's innately within them as well. The place where the treasure is, the treasure land, is the holy mountain Eagle Peak or the 9th consciousness. Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, one and all will together reach the place where the treasure is, the 9th consciousness. This is the one word together. This one word together means that as long as they are together with Nichiren, which that's why they go to the 9th consciousness when they're in the state of non-substantiality, they will reach the treasure land, which is where Nichiren is in the 9th consciousness. But if they are not together with him, if they're not of one mind with Nichiren, they will fall into the great citadel of the Avicii hell, because it means they took a left turn that they shouldn't have and that they went against the teachings of the Daishonin. That's a whole different situation. If you follow the teachings of the Daishonin, you're guaranteed there's no freaking way for you not to make it, because it's already all there. There's nothing you really have to add. You just have to bring it out. Okay, so that was the end of chapter 7. Now we're on page 78 and going on to chapter 8, the prophecy of enlightenment for 500 disciples. 3 important points. Point 1, concerning the parable of the jewel in the robe and the prophecy of enlightenment for 500 disciples chapter. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, this chapter tells the story of the priceless jewel that was sewn into the lining of a man's robe. In a word, it means that Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo have accepted and taken faith in the wisdom jewel of the wonderful law of the one vehicle. The one vehicle, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The mind of faith is comparable to the jewel that is sewn into the robe. So in other words, we've always had this potential with us from birth, okay? But we've never realized it was there, therefore we couldn't even put an effort into bringing it forth. It's finding this teaching that allows us to understand, really? I could be someone different? I could change this suffering into happiness? Oh my goodness, how do I do that? And that's starting on that journey to the treasure land. Let me start over. Okay, point 1 from chapter 8. Concerning the parable of the jewel in the robe in the prophecy of enlightenment for 500 disciples chapter, the record of the orally transmitted teaching says, this chapter tells the story of the priceless jewel that was sewn into the lining of a man's robe. In a word, it means that Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo have accepted and taken faith in the wisdom jewel of the wonderful law of the one vehicle, which is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The mind of faith is comparable to the jewel that is sewn into the robe, because it's the mind of faith that allows us to attach ourselves to Nam-myoho Renge-kyo and reveal our Buddhahood through the process of being bodhisattvas of the earth and propagating the law to others. Point 2, on the passage, the world-honored one, it was like the case of a man who went to the house of a close friend and, having become drunk on wine, lay down to sleep. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says the wine stands for ignorance. And it's amazing that in the Lotus Sutra, this is a passage, so that means that this kind of stuff has been going on for a very long time. Going to your friend's house, getting too drunk, and not being able to go home, I guess, is not a sin. It's a part of the deal. Point 2, if that's part of your deal, that's your karma. Point 2, on the passage, world-honored one, it was like the case of a man who went to the house of a close friend and, having become drunk on wine, lay down to sleep. The Daishonin says, the record of the orally transmitted teaching says, the wine stands for ignorance. Because that's, if all of us that have been there, that is ignorance. And ignorance leads to slander of the law. Yes, it does, because you're not of your right mind. To lie down means to be born into a family that slanders the law. Long ago, major world system dust particle kalpas ago, certain persons drank the wine of evil influence. As a result, in a drunken state, they kept transmigrating through the 5 or 6 lower realms of existence, and now they have been born into families that slander the law. To be drunk means to be lacking in faith. To sober up means to have faith. Now when Nichiren and his followers chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, they are in effect sobering up from the wine of ignorance. Again, we may say that at the top of page 79. Again, we may say that when it comes to wine, there are various gradations. The provisional teachings represent a certain kind of wine, in relationship to which the teachings of the Lotus Sutra represent a state of sobering up. And as to the relationship between the theoretical teaching and the essential teaching, the theoretical teaching represents a kind of wine because it depicts the Buddha as having attained enlightenment for the first time during his time in India. The essential teaching represents a sobering up from this wine because it reveals that the Buddha originally attained enlightenment pardon me, in the remote past. That this is qualifying, getting rid of delusion and replacing it with truth and correct understanding is what going from being drunk to being sober is. And it can be in reality as well. Again, both the theoretical teaching and the essential, because I'm an alcoholic, you should know that. Again, but I haven't had a drink in over 30 years, okay? So that's transformation. Again, both the theoretical teaching and the essential teaching may be said to represent a kind of wine, while Nam-myoho Renge-kyo represents the sobering up from this wine. The wine and the sobering up from it are mutually inseparable. Okay, so the wine isn't really a bad thing because it's sobering up from it that allows for you to get rid of the things you thought you knew that you don't know, because the wine didn't make anything better. It didn't change anything. Why don't I still feel the way I did on the wine? Okay, so the wine and the sobering up from it are mutually inseparable. The wine is ignorance of any kind, not just drinking. And the sobering up from it is the realization of the Dharma nature, of the realization that you have this connection of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo that consists of all things in the entire universe. The wine and the sobering up from it are mutually inseparable. The wine is ignorance and the sobering up from it is the realization of the Dharma nature. Ho, or dharmas, phenomena, stands for the wine. And myo, or wonderful, stands for the sobering up. When we chant myo-ho, or wonderful law, we are expressing the idea that ignorance and a realization of the Dharma nature are in fact a single entity. It's not two different things and one's worse than the other and one's better than the other. It's two different states of the same perfection of life that all of us have. That all of us have. And we're all susceptible to that same state of drunkenness. Okay? So if the state of drunkenness creates unhappiness, that motivates us to seek happiness, and in seeking happiness, we find the Gohonzon. This is, in fact, the reality of the fact that it's a single entity. Thus, Volume 1 of Great Concentration and Insight says the ignorance and dust of earthly desires are none other than enlightenment. In other words, the bottom line is that the ignorance and dust of earthly desires are the firewood that bring forth our Buddha nature. Without our karma, we would never be motivated to find the Buddhahood that already exists within us. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing if you can turn it. Point 3 on the words, in the body and mind, we are all filled with joy. In the passage, now we have heard from the Buddha these prophecies and descriptions of adornment, and how each in turn will bestow a prophecy on his successor, and in body and mind are all filled with joy. Because if they've come to that realization, they've attained Buddhahood, and they've got to pass on what they've realized to the designated people they've promised to pass it on to. That's what they call the successor. After me, some of you will, because of what you've heard from me, go into a different state than you had been. When you go into that different state, you're going to carry that forward. You're going to pass it on and give it to other people. And they're going to give it to other people. And they're going to give it to other people. So this is an exponentially, impressively, exponentially widening net in which all the fish are captured and saved rather than eaten or died. Point 3 on the words to, in the body and mind, we are all filled with joy. in the passage, now we have heard from the Buddha. Now we have heard from the Buddha these prophecies and descriptions of adornment, and how each in turn will bestow a prophecy on his successor. And in body and mind, we are all filled with joy. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says on the bottom of page 79, body here refers to the principle that the sufferings of birth and death are none other than nirvana, while mind refers to the principle that earthly desires are none other than enlightenment. All refers to the fact that the 10 worlds participate simultaneously. Joy refers to the joy experienced by the entire Dharma realm simultaneously. Within this joy is contained the joy of all the Buddhas of the 3 existences of past, present, and future. Now when Nichiren and his followers chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Shakyamuni Buddha experiences joy, as he indicates in the words in the chapter 11 Treasure Tower, I will surely rejoice. This joy is shared by the good and evil realms alike. It is shared by the 10 worlds simultaneously. You should give careful thought to this. And I know we're needing to stop now for this particular segment, but I need you to go back to point 3 and reread it 3 times for me, as I just expressed it to you. And that way I don't have to worry about reading it to you 3 times now, because we need to end this video. We'll go on to chapter 9, prophecies conferred on learners and adepts. 2 important points on page 80 when we get together next. Thank you very much.